Okay, welcome back to the Ecom 80/20 podcast. I'm your host, Jakob Rosenberg, with my partner, Isaac Hyman. And today we have a special guest, NIKKI ELBAZ, a featured copywriter, one of the best out there, really killing it in the copywriting game, featured on Copy Hackers. She works for Shopify Plus, and she works for sales and e-commerce businesses to help them grow to 7, 8, 9 figures. And she's been featured on many different podcasts as well. One of the best out there. We're happy to have you, NIKKI. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Amazing to meet you, NIKKI. I've heard such great things from the copy area. I see your posts all the time. I'm surprised. I'm amazed. What inspires you the most from copy, especially within the email world or the e-commerce space?
Good question. Anybody who has ever listened to anything from me or read anything from me knows that I subscribe to a zillion email lists. You look at my inbox zero is not, it's not even a goal. It's not even on the to-do list. Because I think the best way to get inspiration and the best way to stay on fire and excited about things is to see what's out there. Just to look at all different industries, what they're doing, what they're playing with. Email is such a playful platform where you really can test a lot because it's one and done. It's not living out there forever. And there's, it's built in all the testing capabilities and everything. And you could send it to a small segment, and the risk of testing is so low. So you can see a lot of really fun things and get inspired to do fun things. And it's light, and you could be really playful. So getting that inspiration and seeing all the different emails out there is just definitely how I get inspired, for sure. And always what I recommend to others as well.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I think before we go into the actual specific questions, sorry, Jakob, if I interrupted, but some of the specific questions, I think on the same way, we kind of geek out on email. It becomes that channel where it's so visible. And having worked with also 7, 8, 9 figure brands, we see that there's a lot of testing capability there that doesn't cost a dime, and it's very easy to do, and you can measure total incrementality just through email, and now SMS probably a little bit maybe, but email specifically, it's a great channel. So amazing to see that philosophy.
It's actually cool what you just mentioned, just as you said, the 7, 8, 9 figure brands. It's also so easy for the small brands too. It's one of those few strategies that the small brands and the big guys could do the same. And it doesn't, because it doesn't cost a dime, all the little guys could try it too and see great results from that, which is, you don't usually see that. To win on Facebook, you have to spend a ton of money. You don't have to do that with email. So it's a really cool, nice equalizer. And I think that's why also you'll see a lot of the fun, because I know that when I was in college, we did a whole segment on guerrilla advertising, and I was obsessed. I was like, I'm going to be a guerrilla advertiser. But you saw all these scrappy brands doing these amazing things, because when you don't have the money for it, you have to be more creative. So it's almost like the smaller brands could actually do so much more, because that's where you have to push. If you can't spend on Facebook, so do email and do something super creative and awesome. That's just something that you sparked right there.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree.
Right.
Back to you, Jakob.
Thanks. One of the things that we try to remind our listeners and help them is to work smarter, not harder. That's the goal of the 80/20 podcast, is to focus on the 20% of your efforts to see 80% of your results. And we take a step back and, how did you get started in email marketing? How did you get started in copy, and where do you see, smart ways of doing that?
Cool. So I got started in copy. I went for advertising when I was in college, and I like to tell my catch-up story. I was mentioning it before. When I was 8 years old, Heinz was running the Talking Labels campaign. Do you remember it? Where they just had all these labels, all the labels were these quotes from celebrities or funny, just little jokes and things like that. Ringing a bell at all? Anyway, I was 8 at the time.
All I picture when you do that, say that, is the dancing,
the green ketchup,
popcorn. Right. I can picture the popcorn from the movie theater. Let's go out to the kitchen. So that's the only time I see Heinz or think, I don't know, it's just popped in there. Go on, sorry.
No worries. So I, like, when my mom would go grocery shopping, I would go to the ketchup aisle and I would just pull them all out and read them all and be like, okay, mom, can we buy all these bottles of ketchup? Because like, they're so funny, they're so cool. And she told me, you know, there's actually a job, like somebody writes these, like this is a marketing job. It's called being a copywriter. I was like, that's so cool. I'm going to be a copywriter. And then I decided to try a whole bunch of other things, like, I want to be a fashion designer, or I want to be this, and then eventually when it actually got time to go to college, I went back to that, like, yeah, I really do want to be a copywriter. So I went for advertising, specializing in copy. And I was doing creative copy for a while. And then I stumbled upon this world of conversion copy where you can actually test, and it's data driven, and it's not just, oh, ding, here's an idea. Let's have fun with it. It's also, let's make sure that this is actually good for the brand's bottom line. So that was really exciting when I stumbled upon that world. And then email kind of also happened by accident, where a mentor of mine, Joanna Weeb from Copy Hackers, she read a few of my emails and she said, you have to focus on email. Like you have to do email. And I was like, okay, I'm doing email. You say email, I'm doing email. Exactly. And what I love about email is, again, it has that element of where you could just keep testing, and it's so data driven. Like you see your numbers right away, whereas a website, you kind of have to like look at it over a period of time, or it depends on the traffic and all that. And there's the same with that as email as well. But it's just I love the medium. I love the storytelling elements of email and the relationship that you build with your people. So I'm like so happy she directed me there, because she was so right. It's exactly suited to my strengths and my interests. So I love it.
Great.
I'll add to that. I think you have a great story. Amazing about that. The downside is, one of the downsides of the top e-commerce brands right now, it's a faceless commerce, right? You don't have much dialogue with an Amazon. You don't have much dialogue with a Walmart at the level that they are. And email specifically, like you said before, it allows you to tell that story, and that storytelling is so critical. And obviously copy, content all plays a major role there. So it's fascinating you say that storytelling element. It's such a great trend, and so a great way to compete.
Yeah, and I think that's why the D2C industry has taken off so intensely, is because they're realizing and recognizing that people want that connection, that brand connection, that story. And you'll see so many D2C brands have a really solid email game, whereas like these huge brands that you're like, why don't they have an email list? Why aren't they? I mean, they have one, obviously, but why aren't they communicating all the time? Why don't they have a proper abandoned cart flow? Why don't they have all these basics? Because it's just such a different business model. There's no relationship there.
Right. It's all transactional.
It's fascinating to see.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So that brings us over to our next topic, and I guess, Nikki, where you found it to be, why is you touched on it before, but just elaborate a little bit of why copywriting is so critical for converting through email and SMS, and why do the bigger brands fail? You started to touch on it, but mentioned not too much of a relationship, but go into that relationship a little bit, because what does it actually mean to create a relationship with a customer, whether it's in a cart abandoned or brand story, wherever it is? But why do the bigger brands fail, and even some of the smaller brands that just take the chance of their first email to a customer or potential customer is buy, instead of it being more of the storytelling and touching on that?
Yeah, I think it's two separate things. I think the big guys feel really confident, like we know we have a great product, everybody loves our product, so we just could slap on like a big buy button, 40% off sale. Of course everyone's going to buy. Like we're having a sale. Why wouldn't you buy? We're having a sale. So there's not much strategy there, just because. And it's true. They send out an email and they get sales. The question is, could it be so much better if they then threw out some more stories, more persuasive elements, more reasons to buy, more objection smashing, things like that? So I think that's why the big guys don't think into the strategy so much. And I think the little guys actually have the opposite problem, where they're hesitant to sell, because it's, what if I send out an email and my list doesn't like it? What if I let me just send out some content, or like, let me just not even send anything at all. Or, if I send out this newsletter, they're going to expect this. Like it's a complete lack of confidence and thinking that everything needs to be perfect and all my ducks need to be lined up before I do anything. So yeah, it's an interesting, like complete opposite kind of, ends of the spectrum kind of thing. What was your original question? I feel like I didn't actually get it.
Why copyright?
That was a good answer no matter what.
Yeah, it's still a good answer. Exactly. Really, it was about the why brands fail, but I think you hit the nail.
Why copy, right?
Not so much of that story really gets out there. And you touched a little bit about the data, because Isaac and I, we focus on the click. We focus on the data, and really the numbers are what tells us what works and what doesn't work. So we like to really drill down and see what's been working so that we can double down and optimize on those. And some of the ones that do work for a reason. Some of the ones that don't work for a reason, but sometimes it doesn't always add up too. So the data is really the driver there. So Isaac, what kind of data metrics are we looking for when we talk about copywriting?
Oh, I mean, in general, copywriting, probably you're always looking for, I guess, a few different metrics, but most brands tend to focus on the ones that are moving the needle forward. And they also have to think about the click and the money driven, the revenue and the conversion rate and things like that. And that's kind of table stakes for a lot of brands out there, big and small, of course. But I think that what we're probably seeing now, and I'll pass that to Nikki a little bit, and what you may see is kind of like the brand affinity and brand loyalty and trust, which kind of can be a little bit intangible. And I think we're probably going to see that a lot more as we go, and specifically with email, but specifically with any copy or brand marketing. How that's measured, that's a tough thing to measure, but I think that should definitely be a metric for success for any company. Like it could be even what the churn rate is for a new subscriber based on when they subscribe. And of course you want them to make a purchase, but over time, what does that trust look like, and how did they relate that? So Nikki, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I love it. And this is kind of why I'm so frustrated with iOS 15, is because now we don't have that open, right? So how do we track things? It's going to be through the click, but the click is often so tied to the conversion. And sometimes you just want to see if people are reading, are they just enjoying the emails? Okay, so they don't want to buy right now. Or you want to just send out something that's just content. Can we just see if people are seeing our brand in the inbox and then opening just because they care about us and they feel connected to us? So I actually, Ramit Sethi, not in e-commerce, again, I subscribe to all different industries. He started doing at the bottom of his newsletters, like a little to-do list. So he actually has a few different ones. Like he added on this whole footer. So it's first, did you like this newsletter? And then there's like the 3 different smileys, whether you don't or do like it. And then he has like, okay, now what's next? Based on what he said in the newsletter, like, okay, go check out this blog post. Okay, go, hit reply and tell me X, Y, Z. So he's always thinking about the engagement, not necessarily in a conversion way. He will put one like, oh, buy this course, but also one to continue the relationship and the engagement of, hit reply. He's always telling people to reply and talk to him, or to continue, read a blog post, retweet this, something to continue the relationship and get that engagement that's not just a conversion focused engagement. So it's just very interesting to see. Obviously a different industry, he's more of a content building brand, like that's his strategy. But there's definitely some takeaways there that you can, pull out, like what engagement can you drive towards that's not necessarily conversion driven, that will one day bring in conversions. So it's just, for sure, it's intangible, all these different things like brand affinity and trust. So the easiest thing to do is just not measure them at all, not figure out how you can measure them, because it's so you have that dashboard of, like your clicks, your revenue, your everything. It's so easy to see it. You think that's it. You look at it and you're like, great, we have our metrics. So it takes so much more effort. So it's harder to do, but it's absolutely like so critical to know where you stand in your customers' minds, not just in their wallets. That's
exactly. Yeah, there you go. There's your tagline right there. With that elevator pitch. We'll get royalties. That's brilliant. Yeah. It's just so brilliant because a lot of brands don't have also the small brands don't have the infrastructure or technology to even measure that. Like most brands, sometimes they have that NPS score, net promoter score. For those that don't know what NPS is, it's just such a it's a bigger picture type of thing that entails customer service and phone response and everything after the order. So there's a lot of different elements available to the bigger brands that the smaller brands probably don't know. And like you said before, they kind of been like, it's about the click and I want them to buy. And I mean, we've got a ton of clients that are just about buying. And, there's so much opportunity there to measure the customer's, temperature, I guess, and how they relate to the brand. So well said. That's totally great.
Yeah.
I will add though that I think that the smaller brands could measure. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I'm not here to interrupt. Don't worry.
No. It's not an interruption, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
The smaller brands could they could look at the reply rates and the actual replies and get a really good pulse like that. And if you say, like, what do you mean, who replies to emails, then your emails are not telling you the whole story and they're not engaging that kind of engagement. They're not setting up for that kind of engagement. So like play with plain text, play with, asking questions and seeing if you could get that response. And that will be a good kind of like good rule of thumb measure when you don't have the ability to work really hard and build like a real metric world.
And we've actually, one of the things that we were doing, and I saw this, we were looking for somebody to fill a position, and you mentioned having to-do lists at the bottom of an email. So people don't always read applications. They don't even read all your emails. And sometimes you put something at the bottom that says, if you've gotten this far, please write this in the subject line of your email. Like, just make sure that people are reading all the way through. And also one of the better campaigns that we do for some of our clients are not necessarily the buy or the best sellers. Sometimes it's just the blog post, and it's, those actually convert because people are reading your content and they're then turning into customers because they like what you have to say. So it's all about the content. It's all about what's in there. So, that brings us to the next part of email. And, Isaac, we were talking about this before, is, we've kind of developed a new way of looking at email and SMS copy. And, Isaac coined it as the explosive email copy, or the C4, or the 4 core elements of email. So, Isaac, you want to go into that a little bit? I think that what were those 4 that we were talking about earlier, and how get some insights. Explosive
copy sounds like it feels like the Samsung phone that you bring onto a plane, all of a sudden miraculously blows up. Like, it actually is not miraculously, but somehow it'll blow up.
Let's not do that.
Which I just got back from winter break, and like you're always checking, you got to empty your pockets. I went down to Florida, and you're always nervous around the plane. You're thinking like, okay, what kind of electronic device they have. My son even had to take out his old little Nokia. He plays around with this kind of like Nokia flip phone. And so explosive always sounds challenging, but it's, in my experience and from what I've seen, and again, I'll pass this along to NIKKI also, she's the expert. There's so many people involved in some cases with creating the email, right? There's the designer, then you have the merchandiser, then you have the marketing manager, then you have, the actual email marketer, then you have in some cases, the LCM manager, the segmentation person. There's so many different moving parts that they all have some great elements to introduce, and it all needs to be married together. So what I found successful to kind of orchestrate everyone together was kind of come up with that kind of playbook and checklist, which I call, back when I was running it for some of the top brands, my C4 checklist, my C4 playbook. And that came down to 4 elements, which were context. Why does this product matter? Why are we even sending this email, right? That's all involved in that copy, and just the context and the personas and the audiences and the reasoning, the feature offer benefits. Then there's that's the first part. Then there's the next part, which is the creative. How does the creative give that over? A picture says 1,000 words kind of thing. Then there's the click, which is so important to building that relationship. Every relationship starts with a click. As we know, Google built up their business through that whole model. And then there's the conversion, which is where, okay, now what? Now after the click, what do we want them to achieve? How do we marry the site to the email in this case? And I found that's helped a lot of brands just make sense of it. And that's really what helps move the needle. And then that's kind of why we call this C4. It's very, I guess you'd say explosive and very, it helps explode sales, right? So I found that to be very helpful, but maybe Nikki, you have some thoughts on how that playbook works, or how to really get copy to convert or build a relationship even stronger and have all these teams work together.
I love the idea of a checklist too, and just kind of make sure that all the different teams, like, okay, we're all on the same page here. Did each person contribute, and making sure that everything is still in place even after all of these different hands have
being
touched
heard?
it. And
Yeah.
And exactly, like, because everyone wants to contribute and should contribute, but also making sure that that final product doesn't have too many cooks spoiling broth, but everyone gets that piece there. So I think that's a great idea, to get everyone on board and everyone's contributions with a solid final product. So that's very cool. One thing I was thinking about when you say context is even like a step back, that customer research. And I think that's something that definitely is a huge piece behind, the ones that are doing email strategy right, and the ones that are just kind of,
winging it,
doing well because email is successful no matter what you do. But which ones are really the ones that, the numbers that you see that you're like, but how did you make that much from an email? Because they're so dialed into what the customer wants, and how to make the customer, how to build that relationship, how to get that conversion, because you're really talking their language, you're really speaking their language, you're really helping them through that decision, through the relationship, through everything like that, is being in tune with the customer. So context is not just context of the email and the product and the brand, but also the customer's world, like zooming out and really getting them, understanding them, so that you can then go through everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% agree. That's fantastic that you said that. And we did a webinar, a few days ago, where we were talking about that the top brands, the DTC brands, are actually totally customer driven, data driven, customer centric, and it all comes from having that customer insight, and it steers everything they do, and that's what turns them into, I mean, we dealt with clients that have been in business 30 years, and then you have a Brooklyn, and that's been in business, 8 years, 10 years. They're already a unicorn. Like, how'd they get that way? Because they are data driven, customer centric. So that is exactly it. You need to start with the customer first. And I think maybe in your experience, definitely my experience, I found that a lot of marketers and a lot of brands out there tend to talk about themselves, always talking about themselves and what they have to sell and what they have to offer. And they don't sit back and say, let's listen to the customer and let's decide whatever goes into our email, that's going to be what we're going to share with them.
Yeah. And I think what's like a really solid proof of this is when you look at the numbers, you'll see such a vast difference between like the emails that the brand just sends out, we're running a sale, we just launched a new blog post, take a look at it, the things that are on the brand's calendar, versus any the transactional emails, the emails that are triggered by a customer's behavior, no matter what's inside of them, they always do so well because they're in the customer's framework. They just did something, so it triggers something. They're going to read that email, versus anything that's just sent out. It's arbitrary in terms of their schedule. It's the brand schedule. So it's just like an interesting thing to see that it doesn't matter what's inside that email, but if it's aligned with the customer, not necessarily in terms of what they want or what they're thinking, but what they just did, it's going to do so much better. So it's just exactly. So yeah, it's you have to be customer centric if you want to succeed. That's 100%.
Yeah.
So it's all about, personalization. So, okay. So Nikki, walk us through what it means and how to write, let's say, what your thought process is when you go and sit down to write an email for, let's say, selling a product or selling a service. How do you approach it? And then from there, how do you test it and then eventually launch it for a client?
Cool. So I would say big picture, context wise, is always starting with the research, reading reviews, running customer interviews, just like kind of hanging out in like the Facebook groups where the audience hangs out and just getting a sense for who they are and what they want, and what they care about. Like the number of Reddit threads that I've read in my lifetime about things that I will never buy is fascinating. So just, getting in their shoes basically is always key and critical. And then also to the flip side, talking to the brand and to, what makes the product not necessarily unique and special, because you can sell a t-shirt and not have a differentiator. This is something that it's a little bit of a like hearsay almost, like, what do you mean? Like, you don't have a USP? Like, how could you sell something that doesn't have a differentiator? But the brand itself could be the differentiator, and what they care, what the team cares about. Again, it's that relationship. So getting that side of things, so getting that the customer, getting the brand and the product, and so just laying that foundation first, like in my mind, getting it set up. And kind of marrying the two. So what's the voice and tone? Is the brand providing that? Am I developing that? And just making sure that those things are in line. And then my go-to cheat strategy is always just reading the customer reviews, and you'll see, it's fascinating to see, but the customers say the most amazing copy. You read it and you're just like, that's a subject line, that's a headline, that's a body copy that, okay, I have to kind of tweak it a little bit, but there you go, there's my email, it's done. It's amazing how many ideas you can just completely just swipe straight from your customers' mouths. It feels so cheating, but those are the ones that are going to perform so well because they're so relevant to the customer, because a customer said them. So if one customer said it, that's going to resonate with other customers as well. So that's my go-to cheat strategy for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds fascinating. I think it's like you said, it's actually user generated content. That's the whole point. And it's fantastic. You're taking that information, people put it into say, or maybe their cart abandoned, or their browse abandoned, but you're leveraging it across multiple touches, multiple campaigns. And that's fascinating that you're leveraging that in so many different ways. And most people just look at it, it's going to help my Google reviews, help my conversion, my PDP.
Yes.
But it's amazing that you're using it for all different opportunities.
And also not just taking the review and pasting it into here's a review, here's what our customers say, but taking elements apart and slicing it apart and using it more as ideation as well. So it's not just using the review, for sure, do that, absolutely, but also just seeing what they care about, what they're talking about, the language they're using, and then kind of sprinkling it through everything. I remember when I did a voice of customer presentation, way when I was beginning, and again, it was Joanna Weeb who she said, actually, I wasn't giving the presentation, she was giving it. And she said, if you are using your customer interviews, you just ran this huge round of customer interviews, it costs money, it takes time, and all you're using it for is the headline on your hero, which is you will get a great hero headline, and that's what many copywriters and researchers will create. She's like, that's such a waste. That's not enough. It should be everywhere. Everything you get, everything your customers say, it should be sprinkled everywhere. And you definitely can. And it's so easy too. Why not?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm wondering, have you received any pushback from, let's say, brands or companies that have said I have this mindset, or I want to go in a certain direction. My customer left a review that's kind of tangential to what I would envision it to be. For example, I think this product's great for, I don't know, great for one purpose, but then this customer says it's great for another purpose. Have you found any pushback or any challenges rolling out what the customer is telling us versus what the company wants to go, the direction they want to go?
That's interesting. Actually, I am thinking of a brand that's they shifted tone a lot. So they were very witty and clever at one point, and then they kind of shifted to be a little more luxurious. And a lot of the reviews, it's interesting because I don't know if it was chicken and egg, kind of which one it was, where they, were people leaving funny reviews because they were talking to funny people, or did they just, the customers knew that they appreciated humor, so then they kind of put all this humor inside, so there were all these funny reviews, Are you going to use them once you're kind of shifting the tone? Not really. So yeah, you kind of have to, okay, so let's pick a different review, or let's take the theme that they're thinking of and, you know, work through it here. But always making sure that, okay, so why are we going in that other direction? What's the thought process here? Are we just, you know, raising our prices, so now we feel like we need to be more luxurious? Is this, you know, data that we're seeing from our customers that they actually are appreciating this luxury, and the humor served us well for a while, but now it's not anymore? So kind of, once you could see why the brand is doing something and why they want to go in that direction, then you can kind of see, like, okay, does it make sense to go in your direction? Do we have to find a middle ground here? Are we like ignoring the customers and we really need to get back to what they're doing? So that kind of help with the pushback. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think Jakob and I definitely can relate to that a little bit. We actually were dealing with a brand where they launched pretty early. And they're selling grocery and meats and high-end, high quality, you know, produce and things like that. So they actually just started launching, and they're still refining as they go along their copy to meet their audience. They're refining their language, they're refining their tone. And it's fascinating you said that. I think it's a very a modern, maybe digitally native type of approach, where you're constantly test, learn, refine, and you're constantly just adapting as you go along. And that's great to see from brands that are new. But the brands that are older, you know, probably struggle with that kind of approach, and they're like, yeah, my way or the highway. So it's fantastic. It's fascinating you said that. And yeah, got to constantly test.
Exactly. And that's one of the main things in general, is that a company will come to market with a product, and like you said, might have one use for it, but the customers will realize that it's something else. And they may even have a couple of products that they're trying to promote, and the customers will tell them that this is the product that we want to buy, even though the company really wants to focus on this one, but they want to buy this one. So they kind of have to change their strategy a little bit to really merge that and really listen to what the customer is telling them, because otherwise they're just going to be talking and talking and talking, but the customers want to buy something else. So why do you keep focusing on the product you want to sell and listen to what the customers want to buy? And I think that's just, you know, critical for anything when it comes to that. So
yep. And I feel like that's why it's so important to, I feel like that's why it's so important to hire consultants, is because you get that outside view where you kind of get out of your head a little bit, because it's so hard. You know, you spend all this time building prototypes and what do you mean we were going to use this strategy? And like, you can't even hear it because you're so stuck in it. So when you kind of force yourself to, by working with people that have that outside view and are not biased that much, it could be really, really helpful. Yeah. I mean, I'm biased towards hiring consultants, but I think it's very helpful. Yes.
So with the few minutes we have left, let's touch a little bit on the difference between email copy and SMS copy, because SMS is really starting to come up on the rise here. And, you know, as an agency, we're starting to implement it more with our clients because there's a use for it and a need for it. And we're seeing some good returns on it, but you're limited, obviously. You know, with an email, you can write, you know, a Megillah, literally, if your customers and your audience are going to read it. But with SMS, it can get pricey if you keep on going and go more than your 150, 160 characters that your SMS providers allow. So you really have to zone in on.
I love how you use the word Megillah.
Yeah, can't write that Megillah. You know, let's talk.
Megillah actually is in the English vernacular, right?
Yes, it is.
Is it?
It is.
I don't know. Maybe for those that don't know, Megillah is a very long story you sit through, and actually coming up.
Yes,
so
we're already in that month.
Go on. Sorry.
We talk about it. So,
yeah.
So what goes into writing good SMS copy, if you would?
So it's interesting because I've seen two different SMS strategies, and I have my opinions, but I'm still seeing different things for different brands. So it's interesting to, like, it's still new, so I'm keeping tabs on it. But basically, there are kind of two different strategies. Whereas one is building that relationship again, continuing that relationship, and using it just, you know, the same way you would text your friend, text the brand. So it's a lot of very two-way conversational texting, keywords, you know, keyword-driven campaigns where it's like, you know, want to buy a gift for Father's Day, text back, traditional, modern, funky, or whatever. And then, they then recommend a product based on, whatever kind of descriptor the recipient texted. Just kind of like engaging, being more interesting and kind of conversational and not necessarily as sale driven. And then there's the complete opposite where they are the frame of mind of, if I'm sending a message to your phone, I know it needs to be really important. I'm only going to message you when it's a big sale. That's it. I'm going to send you a message when it's a promotion and it's a good promotion, and that's it. And there are people in the middle ground, but those are kind of the two camps that, like, the brands that come to us, they want to be in one of these two buckets. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, which one are both of them long term, or is one of them more of a short term? My gut is that the sale only is going to be more of a short term strategy, and people are going to have to shift into the more relationship engagement driven kind of SMS. But for now, I do see that working. So that is something that, and just clear, here's the promo, just that's the copy. Like, it doesn't take a genius to write it, and it's just, they work. It's just here's our sale. Pulling out a little bit of copy knowledge where, why should they buy right now? So pulling out the urgency, pulling out the benefits, things like that. And also that, if they want to send more than one campaign in that promotional period, you're not going to write the same thing over and over again. So there's a little bit of strategy there, but it's not as strategic as the conversational approach that's a little more nuanced and a little more human. So you kind of have to have more strategy to it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly it. I think in my experience, rolling out, SMS and push notifications on site requires a little bit more of a kind of I guess you'd say a journey, and you need to be able to kind of connect them all, while also without also being respecting each channel for what it's there for. You can't cram everything in that copy for the SMS and expect to see results. But it's fascinating you said that, because it becomes like that, more personalized in some ways, respecting the channel and respecting the person, but also understanding that what their capabilities are for using SMS for promotion specifically.
Great. And
it's interesting because it's so short.
Yeah, so you gotta really be selective with your words and your text and your copy. So speaking of that, how does one, I don't want to use the word justify, but because we're in the same boat, but as a small business or even a large business, how do you measure success through copywriting? What's the ROI on getting into copywriter? And obviously we're here to promote a little bit about ourselves and our businesses, but how does a company, how do you measure that, so that when you come to a customer, a client, a business, and say they need good copywriting, they need good conversion copy, how do you justify that in terms of return on investment there?
I think just in general, like comparing, like running an A/B test of, a good copy campaign, a designer written copy campaign. I shouldn't say a good copy versus designer written. There are some designers that just have a knack for copy, but there's a lot more to copy than just pretty words. Words that sound good, words that tell a story. Even storytelling is not necessarily copy, because it's not just about the story. It's about the story that drives to the conversion. You're really creating this like slippery slope for the customer to fall down, which sounds really sleazy and markety and like, oh, we're pushing them down the slope and pushing the conversion and persuading them and all that kind of thing. But, humans don't like making decisions. We just don't. And you kind of have to coach the customer or the subscriber through whatever it is that you want them to do. You don't just want them reading your blog post. You don't just want them reading your emails. You want them taking action. So, if you see that people are just buying just because they're buying, your product has enough demand on itself, which I don't really know that many products that didn't have real strategy to build that demand, then you want to be building that demand with your copy. Like, that's what the copy is there for. It's not just to explain things. It's not about education. It's really, there's education happening, but it's much more about moving them through the journey. I feel like there's a lot of misconception about copy, that it's just there to explain. It's a product description, it's a a piece of content, but it's copy kind of sits in between where it's really looking to move the needle. You want to move them through. So if you have someone on your team that can do that, they have the copy skills, then great, wonderful. But even still, I think, again, having that outside look, having someone who is specializing in copy through a whole bunch of different brands and seeing how different brands do different things in different industries and all that kind of thing, you're gonna see more nuance and more up to date with the latest trends and things like that. So it's just, I think it's a smart move to have, honestly, to like have someone in-house that can push out the campaigns that have like tight deadlines. You just decided to run a promo, and you just need someone who can push something out fast, but then to also engage someone who can develop more of the strategy and the things that are really important, that like your Black Friday campaign, your President's Day campaign, things that are or like your automations, things that are really critical that you get them right. So you have that balance of where you have that time sensitive, I need to get this out the door, or like little things, and then also just like the big picture strategy for the things that really, really matter.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I love how you said that. And I think one thing that a lot of brands can do specifically is, some tend to test on the campaign level, right? And just send out how did the campaign do? And then they look at it and they're like, did it do well or not? And it's kind of like very short-term measurement and hard to kind of say whether or not it works. The beauty about email is you have all the automations. You could run that for like a month, A/B test it, ABC test it, multivariate testing, specifically on copy and content, and then come to a good judgment call on what's working and what the lift is. If brands really want to dive into that. So that's the beauty of having those automations. But like you said, I think it's so important to have an outsider perspective. I was reading an article about, and I'm not going to get political here, but there was some administration here in the U.S. Article, and they were talking about that some in politics, they sometimes surround themselves with their insiders and people who are comfortable working with each other, and that's great. But you need that outsider opinion to kind of break through into the next level. So that's always been probably a big challenge to just let people know that you need to be open and honest and transparent and willing to kind of take feedback based on what your customers are telling you, based on what the copy and content is, and then kind of like adapt to that.
And to play devil's advocate, a line you'll often get when you say like outsider perspective is important, then brands will often say, well, I need you to understand my brand. Like my team understands my brand. They spend time in my product and my brand and all that. And it's definitely true, which is why we have such a long research process when we are really getting into the brand and listening and talking with the brand itself. But again, yeah, the customer lives above the brand. So it's really understanding that customer, and an outsider can come in and understand your brand and understand the customer to a point where they can get better conversions than you necessarily can, or working in tandem with your team to like this can be teamwork. It definitely can.
It can be teamwork, 100%. A lot of brands think we all come in and outsiders come in and tell them what to do, but it's just being about part of the team, and we all rise together. A rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah,
Exactly. And one of the things that we mentioned this earlier, that our focus of this podcast is for help customers work smarter, not harder. So you mentioned automations, and just to wrap it up a little bit, what would you say is your core when you come into a brand? How do you help them work smart and not hard, so they're not doing things over and over again?
Yeah, so we actually mostly focus on automations. We'll do campaigns more as like an add-on, kind of like, once we know the brand, once we know the customers, once we know, the product, it just makes sense to start doing campaigns as well. But automations is definitely where you see the biggest lift, because it's that life cycle. It's that plus, exactly, they're multiplied. You set them up once, and then you have to redo them at some point in your brand life, but they last for so long. It's not just a one and done campaign. So that's definitely where we focus. I also have a whole set of playbooks on these automations, so if brands want to DIY it, they can just take the playbooks and set it up themselves. And it's such a good starting point because you set it up and then you're done until you're ready to get to that next level of hiring someone. So yeah, definitely the automations they're just so, because they follow that customer life cycle, they have that persuasion element of, really getting into that storytelling. And whereas a campaign will often just be like, oh, we're running a sale. So, you can like fit in a little bit of story and loyalty building and all that kind of stuff. But where you have more leeway is where you have, what the customer's going through and you have more time because it's more emails. So yeah, automations is definitely like where I could wax poetic about for hours.
Right. Yeah, we're also all about automation, all about working smarter. And if just to wrap up, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you, more about your playbooks and everything that you're offering to your audience, and we've been following you for quite a while. You really write great copy. You're fun to watch. You're fun to listen to. And where can they find you, both online, on the web, and
I love your inbox. I'm always looking at your inbox. So
Inbox.
I love your inbox. How you're always kind of screenshotting what's in your inbox in your zero inbox. But I also have like 35,000 emails in the one inbox. So yes, go ahead. Sorry,
non-zero.
It's funny because it's such an easy LinkedIn. My non-zero inbox. It's like 10 zeros. That's my inbox.
There's a zero in there somewhere, right?
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's the easiest LinkedIn strategy because I just screenshot my inbox, but it really is very informational and educational and interesting, and to see all the different things that brands are doing. So NIKKIELBAZ.com. Not very creative. My Twitter handle is also Nikki ELBAZ. My LinkedIn is Nikki ELBAZ. And the playbooks are NIKKIELBAZ.com/email hyphen, not hyphen, hyphen. Which one's the hyphen? Dash.
It's a dash, yeah.
Dash email dash playbooks. But if you go on the site, you'll get an exit intent for a free re-engagement playbook, and then it will direct you to the paid ones as well. So that's also a nice, easy way of getting that.
Great. Anything else you want to add before we close?
I would love to see you guys on my email list. I send out random thoughts about email, nothing very newslettery because I want it really to be valuable. So anytime I send an email, it's really just something that's on my mind, a podcast I've done, something just that will help you build your strategy in a very like kind of fluid way. So yeah,
awesome.
NIKKIELBAZ.com/subscribe.
Awesome.
And I'll be the first to say amazing having you on this podcast and just kind of learning a little bit more from your background. So many brands don't understand the power of great copy and contextualizing what they do and sharing that in a very digestible manner. And it's like we talked about before, it's very similar to like that elevator pitch. How do you condense everything you do and everything amazing into a single line, but also personalize it on top of that to every single user? Such a challenge. Amazing how the skills of how to do that. So that's really helpful for our listeners and for us as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. I've picked up some things as well. I like the C4, like the checklist.
C4, yeah. Let's
nice.
go watch Die Hard. Yeah.
It's just like a nice strategy that's very compact and easy to apply. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, this has been fun. Thanks for joining. You've been listening to the Ecom 80/20 podcast, and I'm your host, Jakob Rosenberg, with my partner, Isaac Hyman, here with special guest today, NIKKI ELBAZ. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week, everybody.